So hello, thank you very much for choosing this presentation and joining me here. I'm going to discuss this refugee crisis in newspapers. I'm going to focus on the study of effectivity, effective stance in opinion columns about Syria and Ukraine. This is part of a research project called RASIF Math, which is developed at the Complutense University of Madrid and in collaboration with some other universities as well. So I'm going to explain a little bit what effective stance is. Then I'm going to tell you about the corpora that we've used here. Then we'll discuss the results and then go to the conclusions. So to start with, the objective of this study that I'm presenting in this presentation will be to determine the similarities and differences in how authors position themselves and describe events in terms of stance usage when dealing with refugees in the Syrian and Ukrainian migratory crisis. So it's a very specific context. This is part of a wider study, as I told you, a very big research project in which we are analyzing different crises. We have the Syrian, the Afghan crisis, and the Ukrainian crisis. Then we are comparing it with how opinion columns in newspapers talk about illegal immigration. So we're comparing refugees and illegal immigration, or what is considered to be so by these opinion columns. And we're also analyzing other types of speech, like political speech, right? So we are comparing different things. And we also have some other languages. In this case, I'm working with English, but we also have Spanish, and we have some co-official languages from Spain, and we have some other foreign languages as well. So in this case, as I said, I'm focusing on the Syrian and Ukrainian crisis from the refugees' perspective. So I'm not going to talk about illegal immigration in this case. And we have newspapers discourse. So the case study, as I said, effective stance in left wing in this case, because we have different political slants. In my case, I'm going to talk about The Guardian. So it's left wing English newspaper. This gives opinion articles about Ukrainian and Syrian refugees. We have two hypotheses. We have the null hypothesis, which is that there is no variation in the use of effective stance expressions in relation to the language used. There will be found no significant difference in the frequency of tokens in the text about Syria and the text about Ukraine. And then the alternative hypothesis would be that there is variation indeed. What is effective stance? Well, it deals with the positioning of the speaker or the writer with respect to the realization of events. Stance acts are aimed at determining or influencing the course of reality itself, which is based on Langaker's concept, right, and Langaker's idea of stance. Then we have several categories that were developed in more detail by Marina Rese. And we have the authenticity, activity, inclination, intentionality, normativity, and potentiality. All of them wielded with different ways in which the speaker or writer may try to influence the course of action. So, for example, the first one, it has to do with the expression of deontic necessity regarding the realization of the event. We're going to see some examples later. The activity, we have command, inclination, we have the volition, right? The inclination of the speaker writer towards the realization of the event. Intentionality, we have the intentional determination of the speaker regarding the realization of the event. That normativity, in this case, we have judgments of social desirability or requirement, appropriateness, or fit, to social norms regarding the event designated. And then finally, potentiality, we have a reference to participant external possibility to carry out the event designated or for the realization of the event. So the corpus that we've used, we've analyzed here, in this case for this presentation, would be, on the one hand, the opinion columns about the Syrian refugee crisis. And then on the other hand, the opinion columns about the Ukrainian refugee crisis. So both of them come from the Guardian opinion articles. And then the date is different because the Syrian crisis, it took place mainly in 2014, 2016, right? While Ukrainian crisis started in 2022, and we have been collecting text, we have been gathering text until 2023, 2023. The amount of words is very similar. So you can see we have about 13,500 pretty much in both. And what we did with this corpora was to annotate the data manually. So we've been reading the text and annotating them with the different expressions that designate effective stance. And divided into the different categories. And then we have used some statistical analysis. We have applied some statistical analysis on the quantitative results across corpora. So we can see that there is a significant difference between the use of effective stance in the Syrian and the Ukrainian texts. So some examples that you understand a bit better with effective stances in case that you don't know it. These examples have been taken from the corpus. So, for example, the authenticity, remember that this is about the obligation, permission, recommendability, so must, should, need to, have to, can't, right? We have the idea of granting asylum, of providing someone with a life free from political persecution must never be founded. So we have this obligation, it must never be founded, right? The activity, we have this imperative mood, or we have exaltative expressions. In this case, we have let's, which is a very common strategy. So let's do something. You are encouraging the reader to do something, right? So you want them to do something. Inclination, you have the speaker or writer, they commit themselves to do something. In this case, they express what they want to do. We don't know if they will eventually do it, but they express that they want to do it so that they can influence, right? So maybe I want to do this, I want this to happen. I want to be one of those who learn in order to increase, right? So they want this action to happen. Intentionality would be about, again, the intention of the speaker writer or, some other entity. So in this case, we have usually about the speaker writer. So in this case, we have the local group where I help out as a volunteer. So in this case, it's not I want or I aim to, but the group I belong to. So in this case, it's kind of a first person as well. The same as if we had a political speech and we had a politician talking about the party they belong to. So that would be considered, first person as well, because it's talking about a group to which they belong. Normativity, that would be the rightness, the appropriateness. And we usually have it's important, it's essential, it's the right thing, it's worth doing it, it's the best to do. So we have it's important to remember, so you must remember, right? So we can see that it's not the same as authenticity because it's kind of softer, right? It's not actually addressing the obligation of doing it, but it's saying that it's actually something very important to do. So it's encouraging you to do it. And finally, we have potentiality, which we usually have can or different expressions related to possibility, like it's possible, impossible, you're able to do something. For example, education is the most important investment we can make, right? So we can do it, so we should do it, right? So this is something we have to do because we can do it. So let's do it. Okay, so regarding the results, those that you have just seen were some sentences, as I said, some examples from the corpus that they were actually part of the results that you can see now. We have the Syria corpus and the Ukraine corpus, and you can see some similarities to start with. So the authenticity, we had like very similar results. We found 32 and 42 occurrences respectively. So very similar. We have that it's not significant enough. So we have only 2 points, so it's not enough. So the likelihood test indicated that it's not significant enough. The activity, we have 8 and 15, so again, it's very similar. Then we have inclination, 4 and 2. It's very uncommon to have these kind of expressions in these texts. So again, not significant. Intentionality, very, very few occurrences as well. We have 3 and 2 respectively, not a significant difference. But then we have normativity and potentiality. In this case, we have very few occurrences in the Syria corpus, but we have a bit more in the Ukraine corpus. So you can see that the difference here is actually significant. So this is very interesting because we can see how the Ukraine corpus is using this resource much more than we have it in Syria. So in this case, the authors are talking about the appropriateness, socially speaking, from a social perspective of the events that they are discussing in the text. So this is very, very interesting. The approach they take towards the refugee crisis with Ukraine makes use of, in a higher way, in a higher amount, more strongly about normativity resources. It makes use of normativity resources much more, significantly more, than they do when they were discussing the Syria crisis in the past. And then they say with potentiality. So when you talk about what you can do, what you're able to do, then we have that people use it more in the Ukraine crisis than they did in the Syria crisis. So you can see that apart from these differences, also the order or the preference for the resources is different. So we have that the most used resource is in both the authenticity, but the least used resource, then we have inclination, intentionality, and normativity as the most uncommon. And inclination and intentionality is low in both, but then we have normativity as an important difference. Okay. We can see that the final result, 9.79, we have a significant difference in the amount of effectivity resources in the two corpora. You see that there is a significant difference between the two, but this is due to the difference in normativity and potentiality. So if we just compare the amount of resources for the 4 first categories, then there will be no significant difference. Just to conclude, we can say that we have found some similarities in the use of the authenticity, the activity, inclination, and intentionality, but there are some differences in the use of normativity and potentiality. We have a significantly higher use of both in the Ukrainian corpus. So we can reject we can discard the first hypothesis, the null hypothesis that indicated that there is no variation, and we can accept the second one, the alternative hypothesis, because we have a variation in 2 out of the 6 categories that we analyzed. So what are we going to do next? Well, we have to see if the fact of the political slant may affect the results. So we compare it to right-wing newspaper, maybe we have different results. And also we should compare it with opinion articles about illegal immigrants to see if they're discussing the topic differently, and they're using different resources when discussing about illegal immigrants instead of refugees. So I hope that you liked the presentation. I hope that you found it interesting, and thank you very much for joining me here. Have a very nice day. Bye-bye.